Scale can be confusing when you first start using Vectorworks because everything has a separate scale. However, there's really only one scale that matters, and that's the viewport scale. So here are the three things to remember about scale in your drawing. First, design layers must be the same scale in order to view them simultaneously. Second, the scale for sheet layers is always 1:1 and cannot be changed. Third, viewports are where the scale is set, and it's recommended that you set them either to 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch. So first, let's take a look at our design layers. If we come back to our design layers and then open up the organization dialog box, there is a column here for scale. All the design layers in your file must be the same scale. If there's a design layer that's set to a different scale, then it's only going to be visible when it's set to the active scale. So in this example file, everything is set up correctly. It's all set up for 1:48, which if we click in here and we've been playing around with the furnishings design layer, so let's continue playing around with that one. So if I click edit and come in here, I have this section for scale, and if I click on the scale button right there, it's telling me that the paper scale is 1:48, but over here under Imperial, 48 represents 1/4. So let's go ahead and demonstrate what happens if there is a layer that's set to a different scale. Let's change furnishings to a 1/8 inch scale. Click OK, continue to click OK, and now, I don't know if you noticed, but I have furnishings selected as the active layer, and even though up here under layer options I have show snap modify others selected, I can only see the furnishings design layer. If I come over here and pick any other design layer, in this case understory, then you can see I can see all the other design layers. My furnishings are still missing though because they're a different size. So that's what happens when your scale is not set up consistently for your design layers. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll go back to the organization dialog box for the design layers. I will find furnishings, and you can see over here, remember, in this column for scale, that furnishings has now been set to 1:96 instead of 1:48. So we'll edit that, click on this scale button again, then we'll come and we'll change that to 1/4 inch. And if you ever do need to change scale, maybe you've got multiple design layers where the scale is set incorrectly, there is a shortcut where down here under paper scale, you can select next to all layers and it will change all layers to whatever this paper scale is. So 1:48 in this instance, which is 1/4 inch. So we'll click OK, OK, OK. And now we're back in business where we can see all of the design layers. Just as a good rule of thumb, I recommend that you always set the scale for design layers to 1/8 inch. There really is no reason to change it to anything else, and you can just be consistent across all of your files and keep it to 1/8 inch. Next up, let's look at sheet layers. Sheet layers are unique in that they can only be set to a 1:1 scale. They cannot be changed, and in fact, I cannot even find where I would change that in this version of Vectorworks. It's just impossible to change, so they must have removed the setting for it. And this is another good reason why we don't draft on sheet layers, why we draft on design layers. So I just want to demonstrate why that would be. So let's go back to our furnishing layers, and I am just going to double click on the rectangle tool. I'm going to create a 10-foot by 10-foot, did all of that backwards, by 10-foot rectangle. I'm going to place it in the drawing. So there it is, it's to 1/8 scale. If I come over here to my sheet layer now, and let's do the same thing. I'm going to double click my rectangle so I can enter in the exact size that I want the rectangle to be. It still has that as a default from the last time I used the tool, so I'll just click OK and then place it in the drawing. And now you can see that that is really large, and in fact I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to zoom fit to page, or fit to objects, excuse me. I'm going to zoom out using fit to objects. My page is a 24 by 36, but you can see how large this 10 by 10 foot rectangle is. So this is why you don't draft on a sheet layer, because you can't draft to scale. Otherwise, your prints and your exports are going to be inordinately large. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just clean this up real quick. delete those rectangles and we'll come back to the sheet layer. So last but certainly not least, let's take a look at the viewport scale. So the viewport scale, it can be set when you create the viewport, but it can also be edited after the viewport is created. So to do that, you would select the viewport and then come over here to the Object Info palette. And then down here, you have an option for scale. And so the scale for this viewport is 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. And that's the correct scale. You can also change it to 1/8 equals 1 foot, but now that's quite small on the page. So let's go ahead and refer to the PCC drafting standards for a minute. We have this section here for standard scales, and what they're recommending is that you use either a 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch scale. And the reason that we avoid some of these other sizes, the 3/16 and the 3/38, is because it's difficult to measure while in the field. These two scales, they can be measured with a tape measure pretty easily. In contractors, it's pretty common to see them pull their tape measures out and start measuring drawings in the field. The math is too difficult if you start using 3/16 and 3/8 inch scale. So even though sometimes it's going to look better on your drawing because your design is going to fill the page better, this is a communication document and not a piece of art. And so we defer to making it more user-friendly in the field by using these other scales. If you're designing a property, like a standard property in Portland, if you're designing the full property, you're most likely going to end up using a 1/8 scale in order to fit everything on one sheet. If you're only designing the front yard or the backyard, then probably the 1/4 inch scale is going to work better for you. But in all cases, you're going to have to use your judgment, and a good rule of thumb is that the design should take up anywhere between 1/2 to 1/3 of the page, and that way you're leaving lots of room around the edges for the text that's going to need to go on that document. So I just want to go back and look at our file one more time and just reiterate. There's a lot of different things that have to do with scale, but there's really only 3 things that you need to remember to be successful, and that is, number 1, design layers need to be set to the same scale so that you can view them simultaneously. Number 2, sheet layers are always 1-to-1, it cannot be changed. And number 3, that viewport really is where scale matters, and that's where the scale is going to be set for your drawing. And in most cases, you really should be using either a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch scale for your drawings.